The dying Zephyrian's massive form lay crumpled against the crystalline outcropping, his once magnificent scales now dulled to the color of ash. Each labored breath sent ripples through the ethereal mist that perpetually shrouded this forgotten corner of Kepler 442b. Commander Thexaler had been the pride of the Draconic fleet, his crimson wings capable of spanning 300 meters when fully extended. Now those same wings lay folded awkwardly beneath him, torn and bloodied from his final battle above the human colony world of New Meridian. The irony was not lost on him. He had come to this desolate moon to die alone, away from the shame that would follow his defeat. The Galactic Council had assured the Zephyrian Empire that humans were nothing more than clever primitives, barely capable of understanding plasma dynamics, let alone mounting an effective defense against the most advanced military force in known space. Yet somehow, impossibly, a single human pilot in an outdated interceptor had outmaneuvered him during the siege of New Meridian's orbital platforms. Thexaler's massive head lifted slightly as he recalled the encounter. The human vessel had been a relic by any reasonable standard, fusion-powered engines that belonged in a museum, kinetic weapons that fired simple metal projectiles, and armor plating that couldn't have stopped a Zephyrian training blast. The tactical computers aboard his dreadnought had calculated a 99.97% probability of victory before the engagement began. The human pilot shouldn't have lasted 30 seconds. Instead, the encounter had stretched for nearly 4 hours. The human had done something that violated every principle of space combat doctrine the Zephyrians had developed over 3 millennia of warfare. Instead of attempting to match Thexaler's superior firepower or trying to outrun his faster vessel, the human had deliberately flown into the debris field of a destroyed cargo hauler. For reasons that still made no tactical sense, the pilot had begun using the floating wreckage as cover, bouncing kinetic rounds off larger pieces to change their trajectory mid-flight. Thexaler had initially dismissed this as desperation. No computer could calculate the physics required for such shots. The variables were too numerous, the timing too precise. It had to be random luck. But after the 15th impossible ricochet shot found its target, shearing away sections of his ship's defensive arrays, Thexaler realized he was facing something his military training had never prepared him for. The human wasn't using computers to calculate those shots. The pilot was somehow visualizing the complex mathematics in real time, adjusting for momentum, rotation, and gravitational influences with an intuitive understanding that bordered on the supernatural. When Thexaler had finally managed to corner the human vessel against the planetary ring system, certain that victory was at hand, the human had done something that would haunt his dreams for whatever time remained to him. The pilot had deliberately crashed into one of the larger ring fragments, using the impact to slingshot around it at precisely the right angle to bring both vessels into the gravity well of the moon, where Thexaler now lay dying. The atmospheric entry had been catastrophic for both ships. Thexaler's dreadnought had been designed for space combat, not atmospheric flight. The human's interceptor had been equally unsuited for such maneuvers. Both vessels had torn apart during the descent, their pilots ejecting at the last possible moment. Thexaler had expected to find the human's body broken among the wreckage. Instead, he had watched in disbelief as the pilot had somehow survived the crash landing, jury-rigged a distress beacon from the scattered components of both ships, and disappeared into the mist-shrouded wilderness before Zephyrian rescue forces could arrive. That had been 3 days ago. Thexaler's injuries were too severe for his natural regeneration to heal, and his emergency medical supplies had been destroyed in the crash. He had dragged himself to this remote location to avoid the humiliation of being found defeated by a primitive human. Better to die with some dignity intact than return home as the first Zephyrian commander to lose a single ship engagement to a species that had only achieved interstellar travel 2 centuries earlier. The sound of approaching footsteps made Thexaler's massive head turn slightly. Through the perpetual mist, he could make out a small figure moving between the twisted metal formations that dotted this region of the moon. The footsteps were too light to belong to a Zephyrian rescue team, too regular to be one of the native creatures that inhabited these wastelands. As the figure drew closer, Thexaler's breath caught in his throat. It was the human pilot, the boy, and Thexaler was surprised to realize how young the human appeared. Couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old. He wore the torn remains of a flight suit, its emergency patches clearly visible where micrometeorite impacts had compromised the fabric during their atmospheric descent. A crude bandage covered the left side of his head, and he moved with the careful gait of someone nursing broken ribs. But what struck Thexaler most profoundly was the complete absence of fear in the human's approach. The boy had just spotted a wounded Zephyrian commander, a being capable of reducing him to ash with a casual breath even in his current weakened state, and was walking directly toward him with the calm determination of someone approaching an injured animal. The human stopped about 10 meters away, while outside Thexaler's striking range, and simply stood there for several moments. His eyes. Thexaler had heard that human eyes were unusually expressive, but had never had occasion to observe them closely, seemed to be taking in the extent of the Zephyrian's injuries with what appeared to be genuine concern. "You're hurt pretty bad," the human said finally. His voice carried the slightly musical quality that Thexaler had read about in xenobiological reports, but hearing it in person was strangely soothing. "That one looks like it's giving you a lot of pain." Thexaler's throat made a sound somewhere between a growl and a laugh. "Human pilot," he rumbled, his voice echoing strangely in the mist. "I had wondered if you had perished in the crash. Your species is remarkably resilient." "Yeah, we're tough to kill," the human replied with what Thexaler's cultural briefings had taught him to recognize as humor. "Name's Marcus Chum, by the way. Seemed rude not to introduce myself after we spent 4 hours trying to kill each other." The casual way the humans spoke of their battle, as if it were merely an inconvenience rather than a life-or-death struggle, puzzled Thexaler. "You are not afraid," he observed. Marcus shrugged, a gesture that sent a brief wince of pain across his features. "Scared doesn't help anybody right now. Besides, you're hurt worse than I am. Doesn't seem fair to be afraid of someone who can barely lift his head." The simple honesty of the statement caught Thexaler off guard. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered such an attitude from a defeated enemy. Fear, hatred, defiance. These were the responses he expected. This strange compassion was entirely outside his experience. "You should flee while you have the opportunity," Thexaler said, though even as he spoke the words, he found himself hoping the human would ignore his advice. The solitude was becoming unbearable. "When my people arrive, they will not show you the mercy I might." Marcus settled himself on a nearby boulder, moving carefully to avoid aggravating his injuries. "Your people aren't coming," he said matter-of-factly. "I've been monitoring their communications frequencies for the past 2 days. They think you're dead. Called off the search this morning." The words hit Thexaler like a physical blow. He had known, intellectually, that his failure would bring shame to his house and his fleet. But to be abandoned entirely, left to die on this desolate moon without even the dignity of a proper funeral pyre, was a fate worse than any he had imagined. "I see," he said quietly. "Then, we are both stranded here." "Looks that way," Marcus agreed. "Though I've got good news and bad news about our situation." Despite himself, Thexaler found his curiosity piqued. "Proceed." "Bad news first," Marcus said, shifting to find a more comfortable position on the boulder. "This moon's got a really unstable orbit. Based on the seismic readings I've been taking, we've got maybe 2 weeks before tidal forces tear it apart completely." The information was delivered with such casual acceptance that Thexaler almost missed its significance. "You have been conducting seismic surveys?" "Had to stay busy somehow," Marcus replied. "Made a basic scanner from parts of your ship's sensor array. Hope you don't mind. I needed some of the quantum processors to make the calculations work." Thexaler stared at the human in disbelief. The quantum processors Marcus mentioned were sophisticated pieces of technology that required years of specialized training to operate. The fact that a human could not only understand their function, but successfully jury-rig them into an entirely different type of device suggested a level of technical sophistication that contradicted everything the Galactic Council had told them about human capabilities. And the good news? Fexaler asked, though he was beginning to suspect that his understanding of human capabilities had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. Marcus's expression brightened. I figured out how to fix your wing. The statement was so unexpected, so impossible, that Fexaler actually laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed off the crystalline formations around them. Human, my wing structure is held together by biometallic composites that your species has not yet learned to synthesize. The damage is far beyond any repair your primitive medical technology could accomplish. Yeah, about that, Marcus said, standing up and brushing dust off his torn flight suit. Turns out your biometallic composites work on the same principles as the smart materials we use in our spacecraft hulls. I've been studying the composition of your shed scales for the past day, and I think I can use the fabrication unit from my emergency kit to grow replacement tissue. Fexaler's massive head swung around to focus on the human with renewed attention. That is impossible. The quantum signature required for a biometallic synthesis requires computational power that... He trailed off as the implications began to sink in. You have been studying my cellular structure. Just the external samples, Marcus said quickly. I'm not a biologist, but I've got a pretty good background in material science. Your scales are fascinating, by the way. The way they channel and redirect energy is unlike anything we've ever developed. Though I think I see some design improvements that might increase their efficiency by maybe 15%. The casual way Marcus discussed improvements to Zephyrian biotechnology that represented the pinnacle of their scientific achievement, left Fexaler speechless. This was a human pilot, not a research scientist. Yet he spoke of quantum signatures and biometallic synthesis as if they were elementary concepts. What? Fexaler asked finally. Why would you attempt to heal the wounds of your enemy? Marcus considered the question for several moments before answering. Because you're hurt, and I can help. Doesn't seem more complicated than that. The simple honesty of the response was perhaps the most alien thing Fexaler had encountered in his 3 centuries of life. The Zephyria Empire had been built on principles of strength, dominance, and the absolute hierarchy that came from superior military might. The idea of helping a defeated enemy simply because that enemy was suffering was so foreign to his worldview that he struggled to process it. Your species continues to perplex me, Fexaler admitted. During our battle, you displayed tactical innovation that should have been impossible with your level of technology. Now you offer aid to an enemy who came to destroy your homeworld. These actions seem contradictory. Maybe that's because you're thinking about it wrong, Marcus suggested, settling back onto his makeshift seat. You keep talking about levels of technology and species capabilities like they're fixed things. But that's not really how humans work. Explain. Marcus was quiet for a moment, clearly gathering his thoughts. When I was a kid, maybe 8 years old, I found an injured hawk in the woods behind my house. It had been shot by some idiot with a pellet gun, and its wing was shattered. My parents said there was no point trying to help it. Wild hawks don't survive that kind of injury, and even if it lived, it would never fly again. Fexaler listened with growing fascination as Marcus continued. But I didn't know that was supposed to be impossible. So I built a splint out of popsicle sticks and medical tape, fed it scraps of meat from the kitchen, and kept it in a box in my room while it healed. Took 3 months, and my parents thought I was wasting my time the whole way. Did the creature survive? Marcus smiled, an expression that Fexaler was beginning to recognize as uniquely human in its warmth. Not only survived, but learned to fly again. Better than before, actually. It used to come back to visit sometimes, until I left for the academy. Point is, nobody told that hawk it was supposed to be impossible to recover from those injuries. And nobody told me I was too young and stupid to know how to help it. I failed to see the relevance to our current situation. The relevance, Marcus said, standing up and shouldering a makeshift pack that Fexaler now realized was filled with salvaged equipment. Is that impossible is just a word people use when they haven't figured out how to do something yet. Your biometallic composites might be advanced, but they're still just materials following physical laws. And physical laws don't care about species superiority or technological hierarchies. As Marcus began unpacking his salvaged equipment, arranging it in a precise pattern around Thexaler's damaged wing, the Zephyrian commander found himself confronting a fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. Everything he had been taught about human limitations, everything the Galactic Council had assured him was true about their primitive status, was being systematically dismantled by the actions of a single 20-year-old pilot who apparently didn't understand that what he was attempting was impossible. Marcus Chun, Thexaler said as the human began connecting quantum processors to what appeared to be a jury-rigged medical fabricator. What were you before you became a pilot? Engineering student. Marcus replied absently, his attention focused on calibrating the improvised equipment. Just finished my third year at the Mars Technical Institute before the war started. Specialized in adaptive systems design. Adaptive systems design? Creating technology that can modify itself based on changing environmental conditions. Marcus explained, making minute adjustments to the quantum field generators he had somehow extracted from the wreckage of both ships. The idea is that instead of building fixed solutions, you build systems smart enough to evolve their own solutions as needed. Thexaler watched in growing amazement as Marcus worked. The human's movements were precise and confident, showing a deep understanding of principles that most Zephyrian engineers required decades to master. More disturbing was the realization that Marcus wasn't simply copying existing technology. He was improving it, creating hybrid systems that combined Zephyrian quantum processing with human adaptive design principles. How long have your people been developing such technology? Thexaler asked. Depends how you count it, Marcus said, pausing to check his readings on a handheld device that definitely hadn't existed an hour earlier. Formal adaptive systems theory is maybe 30 years old. But humans have been doing adaptive engineering for thousands of years without calling it that. Every time somebody fixed a broken tool with whatever materials they had available, every time someone figured out how to make something work better than it was designed to, that's adaptive engineering. The implications of this statement sent a chill through Thexaler's massive frame. If Marcus was correct, then humans hadn't simply developed advanced technology. They had developed a fundamentally different approach to technology itself, where the Zephyrians and other Galactic Council species created increasingly sophisticated but ultimately fixed solutions. Humans apparently created technology that could evolve and adapt on its own. Your species, Thexaler said slowly, does not think of technology as separate from yourselves. Marcus looked up from his work, surprised by the observation. Well, no. Technology is just an extension of human capability, like using a stick to reach something high up or wearing clothes to stay warm. It's not really separate from us any more than our hands are separate from our minds. As the human returned to his work, carefully positioning biocompatible growth matrices along the damaged sections of Thexaler's wing, the Zephyrian commander began to understand why his people's invasion of human space had gone so catastrophically wrong. The Galactic Council had evaluated human technology and found it primitive, but they had completely failed to evaluate human adaptability. Every tactical doctrine, every strategic calculation, every assumption about human limitations had been based on the false premise that humans would fight like other species, with fixed capabilities, predetermined responses, and predictable technological limitations. Instead, humans apparently treated every encounter as an opportunity to evolve new solutions in real time. The ricochet shots you made during our battle, Thexaler said as Marcus activated the biofabrication sequence. You had never attempted such tactics before. Nope, Marcus confirmed, monitoring the quantum field as it began stimulating cellular regeneration in the damaged wing tissue. Seemed like the logical thing to try, though. Your ship was faster and more heavily armed, so a direct engagement would have been suicide. But you were thinking like a space combat pilot, not like someone flying through a debris field. I grew up flying atmospheric craft through mountain valleys and urban canyons. Bouncing shots off obstacles, is just another kind of navigation problem. The casual way Marcus described revolutionizing space combat doctrine as merely another navigation problem was perhaps the most unsettling thing Thexaler had heard yet. It suggested that humans didn't simply adapt to new situations. They fundamentally reconceptualized them based on their existing knowledge and experience. How many others like you exist among your people? Thexaler asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. Like me how? Marcus asked. Engineering students? Pilots? People who don't know when to quit. People who can improvise solutions to impossible problems. Marcus considered this as he adjusted the biofabrication parameters, fine-tuning the quantum field to match Thexaler's unique physiological signature. All of us, I guess. It's not really a special skill, it's just how humans work. You see a problem, you figure out what tools you have available, and you find a way to make it work. Sometimes the tools are materials and equipment, sometimes they're knowledge and experience, sometimes they're other people with different skills. Other people? Sure. I couldn't have figured out your biometallic composition without help from Dr. Sarah Kim back on New Meridian. She's a xenobiologist who's been studying Zephyrian physiology for years. And the quantum field calculations required for the biofabrication process came from Professor Chun, no relation, despite the name, who teaches advanced physics at the Luna University. I've been in constant communication with both of them since we crashed. Thexaler's blood ran cold. You have been in communication with your homeworld? Of course, Marcus replied, seeming surprised by the question. First thing I did after the crash was establish a quantum communication link using your ship's transmitter array. Had to modify it pretty extensively to work with human encryption protocols, but the basic principles are the same. The realization hit Thexaler like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't been conducting solitary experiments in the wilderness for the past 3 days. He had been collaborating in real time with some of the most brilliant scientific minds in human space, pooling their collective knowledge to solve problems that individual Zephyrian specialists would have required months to address. How many people are currently working on my situation? Thexaler asked weakly. Marcus consulted his improvised communication device. Active participants in the project? Maybe 24. But the research has been shared with the broader scientific community, so probably a few hundred people have contributed insights or suggestions. Dr. Kim thinks your biometallic composition could revolutionize human medical technology, and Professor Chun is fascinated by the quantum efficiency of your neural interfaces. They're studying me. They're studying the principles behind your biology, Marcus corrected. Nobody's interested in exploiting you personally. Actually, Dr. Kim specifically requested that I ask your permission before sharing any detailed biological data. She said it would be unethical to conduct research on a sentient being without their informed consent. The concept of asking permission to study an enemy's biology was so foreign to Zephyrian military doctrine that Thexaler literally couldn't process it for several moments. In the Empire, captured enemies were considered resources to be exploited without restriction. The idea that humans would voluntarily limit their research based on ethical considerations suggested a level of civilization that the Galactic Council had completely failed to recognize. What? Thexaler asked. Why would your people show such consideration to an enemy? Marcus paused in his work, looking directly into Thexaler's massive eyes with an expression of gentle confusion. Because you're not my enemy anymore. You're hurt, you're scared, and you're alone. Right now, you're just someone who needs help. As the biofabrication field began its slow work of rebuilding damaged tissue and bone, Thexaler found himself confronting a truth that challenged everything he thought he knew about the universe. Humans weren't simply more technologically adaptable than the Galactic Council had believed. They were fundamentally different in ways that made traditional concepts of conquest and subjugation meaningless. They didn't fight to dominate other species. They fought to protect what they valued, and when the fighting was over, they immediately returned to their default state of trying to help and understand. As Marcus settled in to monitor the healing process, occasionally adjusting the quantum field parameters while maintaining his constant communication with the human scientific community. Fexaler began to understand why the Galactic Council's invasion had been doomed from the start. They hadn't simply underestimated human technology or human adaptability. They had completely failed to understand what humans actually were. A species that treated every challenge as an opportunity to grow, every enemy as a potential ally, and every problem as a puzzle waiting to be solved through collaborative effort. In the growing twilight of the alien moon, as impossible technology worked to heal wounds that should have been fatal, Fexaler began to suspect that the real question wasn't whether humans deserved a place in the galactic community. The question was whether the galactic community was advanced enough to deserve humans. The biofabrication process continued through the night, the quantum field generators humming softly as they encouraged Fexaler's damaged wing to heal. Marcus had insisted on taking the first watch, monitoring the equipment while the Zephyrian commander attempted to rest. The irony of a human guarding a member of the species that had come to destroy his homeworld was not lost on either of them. As the moon's twin suns began to rise, casting strange shadows through the perpetual mist, Fexaler found himself studying his unlikely savior with new eyes. Marcus moved with the efficient precision of someone accustomed to working in challenging conditions. But there was something more, an almost unconscious confidence that suggested he had never encountered a problem he couldn't eventually solve. The healing is progressing faster than projected, Marcus reported, checking readings on his improvised scanner. Dr. Kim thinks the biometallic composites are actually more compatible with human medical technology than we initially calculated. She's calling it biological convergent evolution. Apparently, the fundamental principles of cellular repair are more universal than anyone expected. Your Dr. Kim, Fexaler rumbled. She speaks as if she has extensive experience with alien biology. Marcus nodded absently while adjusting one of the field generators. She's been studying xenobiology for 15 years. Started when the first Galactic Council contact probes arrived in our system. Most governments wanted to focus on their technology and military capabilities, but Dr. Kim was fascinated by the biological diversity. She's published papers on 17 different species based on the limited samples we've been able to study. 17 species? Fexaler was genuinely shocked. The Galactic Council represented thousands of species, but they had only made official contact with humanity recently. How did your people acquire samples from so many different species? Trade missions, mostly, Marcus replied. Before the war started, there were quite a few peaceful exchanges. Council species seemed interested in human art, music, and literature, so we traded cultural materials for biological and technological samples. Dr. Kim said it was the most productive period of xenobiological research in human history. The casual way Marcus discussed peaceful trade with council species raised disturbing questions in Fexaler's mind. The official military briefings had portrayed humans as an aggressive, expansionist species that posed an immediate threat to galactic stability. But Marcus was describing a period of active cultural and scientific exchange that suggested the opposite. Were your people satisfied with this arrangement? Fexaler asked carefully. Mostly, Marcus said, though there were always some who wanted to push for more formal diplomatic recognition. Dr. Kim was part of a group that petitioned for humanity to be granted associate membership in the Galactic Council. They submitted detailed proposals for scientific collaboration, cultural exchange programs, and joint exploration missions. What was the Council's response to these proposals? Marcus's expression darkened slightly. They were rejected without consideration. The official response stated that humanity lacked the technological sophistication and cultural maturity required for meaningful participation in galactic affairs. We were classified as a developing species under observation and advised to continue our internal development until such time as we might qualify for formal contact. Fexaler felt a cold certainty settling in his chest. And how long were your people expected to wait for this qualification? The estimated timeline was approximately 2,000 years, Marcus replied quietly. with periodic reevaluation every 500 years to assess our progress. The numbers hit Thexaler like a physical blow. 2,000 years of forced isolation, with humanity treated like children who needed to prove themselves worthy of adult conversation. Given what he had learned about human adaptability and innovation in just the past few days, the Council's decision seemed not just arrogant, but catastrophically stupid. That must have been frustrating for your species, Thexaler ventured. Frustrating for some, Marcus agreed. Most people just got on with their lives. But there were groups that felt the Council was deliberately suppressing human development to maintain their own technological and economic advantages. They pointed out that several Council species had achieved galactic membership with technology inferior to what humans had already developed. And what did your governments do with these concerns? Marcus was quiet for several moments, his attention focused on recalibrating the biofabrication field. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully neutral. They submitted formal diplomatic protests requesting clarification of the membership criteria and a more detailed timeline for human integration into the galactic community. I assume these protests were unsuccessful. They were ignored completely, Marcus confirmed. After 6 months of diplomatic silence, the Council sent a single message stating that further communication on this topic would be considered evidence of humanity's continued immaturity and would result in an extension of the observation period. Thexaler closed his massive eyes, beginning to understand the true scope of the Council's miscalculation. They had essentially told one of the most innovative and adaptable species in known space to sit quietly in the corner for 2 millennia while being treated with condescending dismissal. The fact that it had taken 3 years for humanity to develop military technology capable of defeating Zephyrian battle fleets was beginning to seem less like an impossible achievement and more like an inevitable result. When did your people decide that military action was necessary? Thexaler asked. We didn't, Marcus said simply. The Council made that decision for us. Explain. Marcus set down his scanner and looked directly at Thexaler. 18 months ago, a Council enforcement fleet arrived at our outer colonies with orders to contain human expansion until such time as we could be properly integrated into galactic society. They established orbital blockades around 12 systems and began intercepting all human shipping, both military and civilian. Standard containment protocols, Thexaler acknowledged, designed to prevent uncontrolled expansion by developing species. Right, Marcus continued. Except the enforcement fleet commander decided that containment included preventing human relief supplies from reaching colony worlds that were experiencing crop failures due to a virus that had infected their agricultural systems. When humanitarian ships tried to break the blockade, they were fired upon. The implications of this statement sent a chill through Thexaler's massive frame. Interfering with disaster relief operations was considered a violation of galactic law even during active warfare. For an enforcement fleet to prevent humanitarian aid to civilian populations was an atrocity that should have resulted in immediate court-martial proceedings. How many casualties? Thexaler asked quietly. The series relief mission lost 47 ships and nearly 3,000 crew members trying to deliver medical supplies and food to the affected colonies, Marcus replied, including my sister. The personal revelation hit Thexaler like a physical blow. Marcus had been treating him with kindness and compassion while knowing that Zephyrian forces had been responsible for killing members of his own family. The level of moral strength required for such behavior was beyond anything Thexaler had encountered in his 3 centuries of military service. I am sorry for your loss, Thexaler said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. Marcus nodded quietly. She was a xenobiologist, like Dr. Kim, volunteered for the relief mission because she wanted to help develop disease-resistant crops for the affected colonies. She believed that scientific cooperation was the key to building lasting peace between species. And you do not hold me responsible for her death. You weren't there, Marcus said simply. And even if you had been, what good would hatred do now? She would have wanted me to help you if I could. That's the kind of person she was. The casual way Marcus dismissed any possibility of revenge or retribution was perhaps the most alien thing Thexaler had encountered yet. In Zephyrian culture, the death of a family member at the hands of an enemy created blood debts that lasted for generations. The concept of choosing compassion over vengeance was so foreign to his worldview that he struggled to process it. Your species, Thexaler said slowly, does not believe in retribution. Some do, Marcus admitted, but most of us learned a long time ago that revenge doesn't bring people back. It just creates more pain. My sister died trying to save lives. The best way to honor her memory is to keep saving lives when I can. As the biofabrication field continued its work, Thexaler found himself confronting uncomfortable questions about his own motivations. He had joined the invasion fleet not out of bloodlust or conquest, but because he genuinely believed the Council's assertions that humanity posed a threat to galactic stability. The military briefings had portrayed humans as an aggressive, uncontrollable species that would eventually destroy the peaceful order that the Council had spent millennia building. Yet everything he had observed suggested the opposite. Marcus wasn't an anomaly. His behavior was consistent with everything the human pilot had told him about his species' values and cultural norms. If Marcus was representative of humanity in general, then the Council hadn't simply misunderstood human capabilities. They had completely mischaracterized human intentions. Marcus, Thexaler said carefully, what would your people do if the Galactic Council offered them full membership tomorrow? If they apologized for their previous treatment and invited humanity to participate as equals in galactic governance? Marcus considered the question while checking the biofabrication parameters. Honestly, most people would probably be thrilled. Despite everything that's happened, there are still millions of humans who dream of exploring the galaxy, learning from other species, and contributing to galactic civilization. The war is popular because people see it as defending our right to exist, not because they want to destroy the Council. And the minority who would not be thrilled, they'd want guarantees, Marcus said, evidence that the Council was serious about treating humanity as an equal partner rather than a junior member to be patronized and controlled. They'd want institutional reforms that prevented future incidents like the blockade. And they'd want justice for the people who died during the humanitarian crisis. Justice. Trials for the enforcement fleet commanders who opened fire on relief ships. Reparations for the families of those killed. Formal acknowledgement that the Council's actions violated galactic law. Marcus paused. Nothing that couldn't be accomplished through existing legal frameworks, assuming the Council was willing to admit they made mistakes. The reasonableness of these demands was almost shocking to Thexaler. He had expected calls for massive territorial concessions, technological tributes, or political dominance. Instead, Marcus was describing a measured response focused on legal accountability and preventing future abuses. It was the kind of negotiating position that suggested humans were interested in justice rather than conquest. Do you believe such an agreement is possible? Thexaler asked. I did, before the invasion started, Marcus admitted. But the Council's decision to launch a military assault instead of opening diplomatic negotiations doesn't suggest they're interested in peaceful resolution. Hard to trust someone who responds to requests for justice by trying to kill you. The quiet bitterness in Marcus's voice was the first negative emotion Thexaler had heard from him, and it was entirely directed at the institutional failures that had led to the current conflict rather than at individual enemies. Even now, facing someone who had come to destroy his homeworld, Marcus seemed more disappointed in the breakdown of diplomacy than angry at the people who had broken it. A soft chime from the biofabrication equipment interrupted Thexaler's thoughts. Marcus quickly checked the readings, his expression brightening as he reviewed the data. Excellent news, Marcus reported. The bone structure has regenerated completely, and the muscle tissue is about 70% healed. Dr. Kim thinks you should have full mobility back within another 12 hours. 12 hours? Thexaler tested his wing experimentally, amazed to discover that the pain had almost completely disappeared. Your projections indicated at least 3 days for this level of healing. Turns out Zephyrian biology is remarkably responsive to directed quantum stimulation, Marcus explained, beginning to pack up some of the monitoring equipment. Dr. Kim thinks it's an evolutionary adaptation to your species' natural healing abilities. The biometallic composites in your cellular structure act like quantum amplifiers, multiplying the effectiveness of any external healing stimulus. This discovery, Fexaler said slowly, it could revolutionize medical treatment for my people. That's what Dr. Kim thinks, Marcus confirmed. She's already started theoretical work on quantum healing protocols that could be adapted for different species. If the war ended tomorrow, this research alone could save millions of lives across the galaxy. The casual way Marcus discussed the potential benefits to enemy populations was yet another example of human thinking that defied Zephyrian understanding. In the Empire, medical advances were considered strategic advantages to be guarded jealously from potential enemies. The idea of deliberately sharing life-saving technology with hostile species was incomprehensible. Your people would share this technology with the Galactic Council? Fexaler asked. Of course, Marcus replied, seeming surprised by the question. Medical knowledge belongs to everyone. Dr. Kim has already started uploading her preliminary research to the Human Medical Archive, which is accessible to researchers from any species. She says the ethical obligation to preserve life supersedes political considerations. Even during wartime, especially during wartime, Marcus said firmly, war is about protecting what we value, and what we value most is the principle that all sentient life has inherent worth. If we abandon that principle to gain military advantages, we'd be destroying the very thing we're fighting to defend. As Fexaler contemplated this statement, he began to understand why human forces had been so effective against supposedly superior opponents. They weren't fighting for territorial expansion or resource acquisition or even species survival in the traditional sense. They were fighting for the right to remain themselves, to preserve their values, and their approach to existence in the face of forced conformity to council norms. That kind of motivation was incredibly powerful, but it also suggested that the war could end tomorrow if the Council simply acknowledged humanity's right to exist as equals. Humans weren't seeking to destroy or dominate other species. They just wanted to be left alone to pursue their own development while contributing to galactic civilization on their own terms. The communication device you constructed, Fexaler said, indicating the quantum transmitter Marcus had built from salvage components. Could it reach Council military frequencies? Probably, Marcus replied. The quantum encryption is pretty sophisticated, but it's based on mathematical principles rather than species-specific technology. Why? I am wondering if it would be possible to establish communication with my former fleet, Fexaler said carefully, to provide them with an accurate assessment of the situation. Marcus studied him closely. What kind of assessment did you have in mind? Fexaler was quiet for several minutes, considering his words carefully. Everything he had learned about humans in the past few days contradicted not just the military briefings he had received, but the fundamental assumptions about species hierarchy that underpinned Zephyrian civilization. If he was correct about human capabilities and intentions, then the war was not only unjust, it was unwinnable. An assessment that suggests immediate diplomatic contact would be more productive than continued military action, Fexaler said finally. You think the Council would listen to you? I think they would have to, Fexaler replied. I'm the first Zephyrian commander to engage human forces in extended single combat, and survive to report the results. My testimony regarding human capabilities would carry significant weight in military planning circles. Marcus nodded slowly. And what would that testimony include? The truth, Fexaler said simply, that humans are not the primitive, aggressive species the Council believes them to be. That human technology is not inferior to Council technology, merely different in ways that make traditional military doctrine ineffective. And that human intentions appear to be fundamentally peaceful, focused on defense and collaboration rather than conquest and domination. That's a pretty significant change in official policy you're proposing. The alternative is continued warfare against an opponent we do not understand, using tactics that have proven ineffective in pursuit of goals that may be fundamentally misguided, Thexaler replied. As a military commander, I am obligated to recommend the strategy most likely to achieve victory with minimal casualties. Based on my observations, that strategy is immediate negotiation. Marcus was quiet for several moments, apparently weighing the implications of Thexaler's proposal. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully neutral. If you're serious about this, I can establish a communication link with my command structure. They might be willing to facilitate contact with council representatives through neutral channels. You would do this? It's what my sister would have wanted, Marcus said quietly. She always believed that peace was possible if people were willing to listen to each other instead of just shooting. Maybe she was right. As Marcus began modifying the quantum transmitter to access council military frequencies, Thexaler found himself hoping that the human sister had indeed been right. Because if she wasn't, if the council proved incapable of abandoning their preconceptions and acknowledging their mistakes, then the galaxy was facing a conflict that could only end in tragedy for all involved. The humans had already proven they could adapt and evolve in ways that made traditional conquest impossible. If forced to continue fighting, they would undoubtedly develop new capabilities that would make the current war look like a minor skirmish. And given what he had learned about human values and determination, Thexaler was beginning to suspect that they would never stop fighting as long as their right to exist was under threat. The question was whether the Galactic Council was wise enough to end the war before learning that lesson the hard way. The quantum transmitter hummed to life as Marcus completed his modifications, its crystalline components glowing with an eerie blue light that cut through the perpetual mist surrounding their makeshift camp. Thexaler watched with fascination as the human pilot interfaced with technology that had taken Zephyrian engineers centuries to develop, adjusting quantum frequencies with the casual confidence of someone tuning a simple radio. I'm picking up multiple council fleet channels, Marcus reported, monitoring the device with equipment he had somehow constructed from the scattered debris of their crashed vessels. Your people are maintaining communication silence, but there's a lot of encrypted chatter on Altarian and Vexi frequencies. The Altarians and Vexi were assigned to the secondary assault fleets targeting Earth's outer defensive perimeter, Thexaler explained. If they're communicating freely, it suggests the offensive is not proceeding as planned. Marcus adjusted the receiver to focus on the Altarian channels, running the encrypted signals through a decryption algorithm that appeared to be based on quantum mathematics far more advanced than anything Thexaler had seen before. The fact that a human engineering student could break council military encryption codes in real time was disturbing on multiple levels. Got something, Marcus said, concentrating on the decoded transmissions. Sounds like the third Altarian battle group has taken significant casualties attempting to engage human defensive positions around Proxima Station. They're requesting immediate reinforcement and, wow, what is it? They're specifically requesting that no Zephyrian units be assigned to assist them, Marcus continued, his expression growing puzzled. According to this transmission, Zephyrian tactical doctrine is fundamentally incompatible with current operational requirements against human forces. Thexaler felt a cold certainty settling in his chest. Display the transmission data. Marcus configured his improvised display screen to show the decoded communications, and Thexaler read the tactical reports with growing dismay. Fleet after fleet was reporting similar problems. Human defensive positions that appeared vulnerable to frontal assault, but proved to be elaborate traps, human vessels that fought with tactics that violated established principles of space combat, and human technology that seemed to evolve new capabilities during the course of individual battles. This report from the Vexi 7th Fleet, Thexaler said, pointing to one particularly disturbing entry, describes human fighters that modified their weapon systems during combat to exploit weaknesses in Vexi shield harmonics. Such modifications should require extensive laboratory analysis and weeks of engineering development. Unless you understand the underlying principles well enough to improvise solutions on the fly, Marcus suggested. How long would it take your people to develop countermeasures for a new type of enemy shield? Months at minimum, Thexaler admitted. The quantum mathematics involved in shield harmonic analysis requires massive computational resources and detailed experimental verification. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Right, but that assumes you're trying to find the perfect solution. Humans tend to look for good enough solutions that can be implemented immediately. We might not understand exactly why something works, but if it works reliably enough for the current situation, we'll use it and figure out the details later. That approach seems incredibly dangerous. What if your improvised solutions fail at a critical moment? Then, we improvise new solutions, Marcus replied with a shrug. That's the beauty of adaptive thinking. You're never locked into a single approach that might become obsolete. Every failure teaches you something new about the problem, which helps you develop better solutions. As Thexaler continued reading the tactical reports, he began to understand the true scope of the disaster unfolding across Council space. Human forces weren't simply winning individual battles through superior technology or numerical advantage. They were systematically dismantling Council military doctrine by refusing to fight in predictable ways. Every engagement became a learning experience that fed into the next engagement, with human forces constantly evolving new tactics based on lessons learned from previous encounters. It was like fighting an enemy that became more sophisticated and dangerous after every battle, eventually developing capabilities specifically designed to exploit the weaknesses they had observed in Council forces. Marcus, Thexaler said slowly, how many humans are currently involved in analyzing these tactical encounters? Marcus consulted his communication device, scrolling through what appeared to be a real-time feed of information from across human space. Hard to say exactly, but the Tactical Analysis Network has about 2 million registered participants. That includes active military personnel, civilian researchers, retired veterans, engineering students, and probably a few thousand people who just find it intellectually interesting. 2 million people. It's a collaborative intelligence project, Marcus explained. Every engagement gets recorded and analyzed by whoever wants to contribute insights. Military commanders get access to the best ideas generated by the entire network, rather than being limited to the knowledge of their immediate staff. The implications of this statement were staggering. Council military forces were facing not just human soldiers, but the collective intelligence of the entire human species. Every tactical innovation, every technological breakthrough, every strategic insight was being shared instantly across all human forces. This is how your people have been achieving technological advances so rapidly, Thexaler realized. You are not limited by institutional hierarchies or security classifications that prevent information sharing. Right? Marcus confirmed. Open source warfare, some people call it. The idea is that the best solutions come from having as many intelligent minds as possible working on the same problem. As if to demonstrate his point, Marcus's communication device chimed with an incoming message. He reviewed the data quickly, then looked up at Thexaler with excitement. Dr. Kim just sent news about your biometallic composition analysis, Marcus reported. She's been collaborating with materials scientists from 7 different universities, and they think they've figured out how to synthesize biometallic composites using human manufacturing techniques. That should be impossible, Thexaler protested. Biometallic synthesis requires quantum-level control, a molecular assembly that your species has not yet achieved. That's what everyone thought until about 6 hours ago, Marcus replied, pulling up the research data on his display screen. But Dr. Sarah Chan at Tokyo University had an insight about using quantum manufacturing processes to create the metallic matrices, while Professor Williams at Cambridge figured out how to use engineered bacteria to grow the biological components. When they combined their approaches, Marcus trailed off as new data appeared on his screen. Oh wow, they've already built a working prototype. The first human biometallic composite samples are coming off the production line right now. Thexaler stared at the display in disbelief. What Marcus was describing should have required years of research and development, even with complete knowledge of Zephyr manufacturing techniques. The fact that human researchers had reverse-engineered and improved upon biometallic synthesis in a matter of hours suggested capabilities that bordered on the impossible. How many people worked on this project? Fex Aller asked weakly. Let me check the collaboration credits, Marcus said, scrolling through the research documentation. Looks like 47 primary researchers from 12 institutions, with additional contributions from maybe 300 graduate students and volunteer analysts. Oh, and they're sharing all the research data with the broader scientific community so other teams can build on their work. They're sharing the technology freely? Of course, Marcus replied, seeming surprised by the question. Scientific knowledge belongs to everyone. Dr. Kim specifically noted that biometallic composites could revolutionize medical treatment for injured council species, so she wanted to make sure the research was available to anyone who needed it. The casual way Marcus discussed sharing advanced military technology with enemy forces was perhaps the most alien aspect of human behavior Thex Aller had encountered yet. In the Zephyrian Empire, technological advantages were jealously guarded state secrets. The idea of deliberately gifting such capabilities to hostile forces was incomprehensible. Marcus, Thex Aller said carefully, do your people understand that they are essentially arming their enemies by sharing this research? We're not arming enemies, Marcus corrected. We're sharing medical technology that can save lives. If Council forces use biometallic composites to build better armor or weapons, that just means we'll have to develop better solutions. But if they use it to heal wounded soldiers or treat civilian casualties, that's a win for everyone. And if this technology allows Council forces to continue fighting more effectively? Marcus considered this question seriously before answering. Then, we'll adapt. We always do. But we won't abandon our principles just to gain temporary military advantages. If we did that, we'd be destroying the very things we're fighting to protect. As Thex Aller pondered this response, his communication device suddenly activated, displaying an incoming transmission on Zephyrian military frequencies. The sender identification indicated it was from Admiral Kexthan, the overall commander of the Zephyrian battle fleet. Thex Aller, respond if you are receiving this transmission. The Admiral's voice crackled through the quantum static. Your status has been updated to missing in action rather than killed in action. Intelligence suggests you may have survived the atmospheric engagement. Thex Aller exchanged glances with Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. This could be our opportunity to establish diplomatic contact, the human said. Taking a deep breath, Thex Aller activated the transmitter. Admiral Kexthan, this is Commander Thex Aller. I am alive, but severely injured on the surface of Moon Designation 447C. Thex Aller, thank the ancestors you survived. We will dispatch a rescue team immediately. Admiral, before you commit rescue resources, I must provide a critical tactical assessment based on my extended contact with human forces. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Proceed with your assessment, Commander. Thex Aller looked at Marcus one more time, receiving an encouraging nod from the human pilot. Admiral, I must report that our intelligence regarding human capabilities has been fundamentally inaccurate. They're not a primitive species, and their technology is not inferior to our own. It is simply different in ways that make our traditional tactical approaches ineffective. Explain. Human forces adapt and evolve their capabilities in real time during combat engagement. They treat each battle as a learning experience that immediately informs the tactics and technology used in subsequent battles. They are not fighting as individual units with fixed capabilities, but as a collective intelligence that becomes more sophisticated with each encounter. Another long pause. Commander, are you certain you have not suffered head trauma that might be affecting your judgment? Admiral, the human pilot who shot down my vessel has been treating my injuries for the past 3 days using improvised medical technology that exceeds our own capabilities in several key areas. He's been in constant communication with his scientific community, sharing real-time updates about Zephyrian biology and technology with researchers across human space. The prisoner has been communicating with enemy forces? He's not a prisoner, Admiral. I am under his protection. Fex Aller could almost feel the shock radiating through the quantum link. Admiral, I strongly recommend immediate diplomatic contact with human military leadership. Continued warfare against this species will result in our own destruction. Commander, you will maintain radio silence until rescue forces arrive. These communications may be compromised. Admiral, please listen to me carefully. The humans are not our enemies. They're defending themselves against what they perceive as an unprovoked attack. If we approach them with diplomatic intentions rather than military ones, I believe they would be willing to negotiate a peaceful resolution. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only quantum static in its wake. Fex Aller stared at the dead communicator for several moments before turning to Marcus with an expression of frustration. Your admiral doesn't seem receptive to new information, Marcus observed. Military hierarchy does not reward officers who contradict established doctrine. Fex Aller replied bitterly. Admiral Kex then rose to his position by following orders and confirming the beliefs of his superiors. Admitting that our entire strategic assessment has been wrong would effectively end his career. So what happens now? Fex Aller considered their options carefully. The rescue team will arrive within 6 hours. They will expect to find me wounded and alone with a dead or captured human pilot. When they discover the actual situation, they will likely attempt to take you prisoner for intelligence purposes. And you think that would be a bad idea? I think it would be a catastrophic mistake, Fex Aller replied. You're not just a pilot or a prisoner of war. You are a walking demonstration of human capabilities and values. If Council leadership could spend time with you as I have, they would understand that this war is not only unjust, but unwinnable. Marcus was quiet for several moments, apparently weighing their limited options. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful, but determined. What if we gave them a demonstration they couldn't ignore? What do you mean? Marcus gestured toward the quantum transmitter and the various pieces of advanced technology he had constructed over the past few days. Your people think human technology is primitive, right? What if we showed them just how wrong they are? Ow! Give me access to your ship's computer core, Marcus said, his eyes bright with sudden inspiration. I'll show them what human engineering is really capable of. Fex Aller stared at the human pilot, beginning to suspect that whatever Marcus had in mind was going to be either brilliant or terrifying. Possibly both. Marcus, he said slowly, what exactly are you planning to do? Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since they had met, Fex Aller caught a glimpse of the same adaptive intelligence that had allowed this young human to defeat one of the Galactic Council's finest military commanders. I'm going to turn your crashed dreadnought into a diplomatic embassy, Marcus replied. And then I'm going to invite both sides to come see what happens when humans really put their minds to something. As Marcus began gathering his equipment, preparing to implement whatever impossible plan he had conceived, Fex Aller found himself hoping that Admiral Kex then and the Galactic Council were prepared for their first real introduction to human ingenuity. Because something told him they were about to learn why underestimating humanity had been the worst mistake in galactic history. The wreckage of Fex Aller's dreadnought stretched across nearly half a kilometer of the moon's crystalline landscape, its twisted hull gleaming dully in the light of the twin suns. What had once been one of the Galactic Council's most advanced warships now resembled a metallic mountain range, its broken sections jutting up from impact craters like the bones of some ancient leviathan. Marcus surveyed the debris field with the calculating gaze of an engineer, his improvised scanner detecting energy signatures and structural integrity points throughout the wreckage. Despite the catastrophic damage from their atmospheric entry, significant portions of the ship's core systems remained intact, protected by redundant shielding that had been designed to survive direct hits from antimatter weapons. The primary computer core is still functional, Marcus reported, consulting readouts on his handheld device. Quantum processing arrays, memory matrices, even the holographic display systems. Most of the damage is to the outer hull and propulsion systems. The computer core contains classified military intelligence, Fex Aller warned, though his tone suggested he was more concerned about Marcus's safety than information security. Accessing it without proper authorization codes will trigger defensive countermeasures that could prove lethal. Marcus grinned, the expression containing just a hint of the wild confidence that had allowed him to defeat a superior opponent through impossible maneuvers. Good thing I've been studying Zephyrian computer architecture for the past 3 days. Dr. Kim forwarded me the research files from the technology exchange programs. Those files contained only basic interface protocols, Thexaler protested. Nothing that would allow access to military-grade security systems. True, Marcus acknowledged, beginning to unpack the quantum processing units he had salvaged from both their crashed vessels. But Dr. Kim also sent me the theoretical papers that Professor Chan published about universal computing principles. Turns out quantum logic gates work the same way regardless of which species designed them. As Marcus began connecting his improvised equipment to the Dreadnought's primary access ports, Thexaler watched with growing fascination and alarm. The human pilot was attempting to interface technology from 2 completely different species using nothing but theoretical knowledge and salvage components. It should have been impossible. The fact that Marcus seemed confident it would work was either inspiring or terrifying, depending on one's perspective. Okay, I'm detecting the security protocols, Marcus reported, studying patterns of quantum encryption flowing across his makeshift display screens. Looks like a 7-layer authorization system based on biometric identification, security codes, and, this is interesting. What? The 7th layer appears to be some kind of psychological evaluation protocol. It's designed to analyze the cognitive patterns of whoever is trying to access the system, presumably to verify that they're actually Zephyrian rather than a disguised enemy agent. Thexaler felt his blood run cold. Marcus, that protocol is specifically designed to detect non-Zephyrian brain patterns. If you attempt to access the system directly, it will identify you as a hostile intruder and initiate lethal countermeasures. Right, which is why I'm not going to access it directly, Marcus replied, making subtle adjustments to his quantum interfaces. Instead, I'm going to create a cognitive bridge that translates human thought patterns into Zephyrian neural signatures. That is impossible, is it? Marcus asked, pulling up the xenobiological data that Dr. Kim had been analyzing. Dr. Kim discovered that Zephyrian neural architecture is based on the same quantum coherence principles that govern human consciousness. The specific patterns are different, but the underlying mathematical structures are remarkably similar. As Marcus worked, his improvised equipment began generating complex interference patterns in the quantum fields surrounding the Dreadnought's computer core. To Thexaler's amazement, the security protocols began responding as if they were receiving legitimate authorization codes from a high-ranking Zephyrian officer. Impossible, Thexaler breathed, watching classified information appear on Marcus's display screens. You are accessing military command protocols that should require Fleet Admiral authorization. Actually, I'm accessing them with your authorization, Marcus explained, fine-tuning the cognitive bridge to match Thexaler's specific neural patterns. The biometric scanners are reading the quantum signature from your brain, transmitted through the neural interface I've built into the medical equipment that's been monitoring your healing process. Thexaler stared at the human in shock. You have been monitoring my neural activity? Just the basic patterns necessary to ensure the biofabrication field was properly calibrated, Marcus assured him. But those same patterns happen to contain your unique cognitive signature, which the computer recognizes as valid authorization for accessing the command systems. And you discovered this accidentally? Not exactly, Marcus admitted with a slightly guilty expression. I suspected the computer core might be useful, so I designed a medical monitoring system to capture the data I would need for this kind of interface. Dr. Kim thought it was an interesting application of xenoneurology principles. As the implications of what Marcus had accomplished began to sink in, Thexaler found himself confronting yet another demonstration of human capabilities that should have been impossible. In 3 days, using nothing but salvaged equipment and theoretical knowledge, a 20-year-old engineering student had successfully broken the most sophisticated computer security system in the Zephyrian military arsenal. Marcus, Thexaler said slowly, Do you understand what you have just done? Gained access to your ship's computer so we can implement diplomatic protocols? Marcus suggested, though his tone indicated he understood the broader implications. You have demonstrated that human technology is not simply different from Council technology. It is superior in ways that make our most advanced security measures meaningless. If Council leadership sees this, they'll understand that continued warfare is futile, Marcus finished. Which is exactly what we want them to understand. As Marcus began uploading new programming protocols into the Dreadnought's computer systems, Thexaler watched in fascination as the ship's internal structure began to reconfigure itself. Sections of the hull that had been damaged during the crash suddenly straightened and realigned, powered by backup systems that Marcus had somehow reactivated and optimized. "What are you doing to my ship?" "Converting it into a diplomatic facility," Marcus replied, monitoring the reconstruction process on multiple display screens. "The hull damage is mostly superficial. The real structure is intact. I'm just rearranging the internal spaces to create a neutral meeting area where both human and Council representatives can interact safely. The ship's defensive systems are being reprogrammed to protect all occupants equally, regardless of species," Marcus continued. "I've also upgraded the life support systems to accommodate the atmospheric requirements of 17 different Council species, based on the xenobiological data Dr. Kim has been collecting." Thexaler watched in amazement as his former warship transformed before his eyes. Weapon emplacements retracted into the hull, replaced by communication arrays and diplomatic reception areas. The armored bridge became a transparent observation deck where beings from different species could meet face-to-face without the barriers typically required for first contact protocols. The quantum communication systems have been enhanced to provide real-time translation for over 300 galactic languages, Marcus reported. "And I've established direct links to both human and Council diplomatic networks, so representatives can maintain contact with their governments throughout any negotiations." "How long did this reconstruction take?" Thexaler asked, still struggling to process what he was witnessing. Marcus checked his chronometer. "About 4 hours. Most of that was spent writing the translation algorithms. Turns out universal grammar principles are more complex than I initially thought." The casual way Marcus discussed revolutionizing diplomatic technology in an afternoon was perhaps the most unsettling thing Thexaler had heard yet. Human engineers didn't simply solve problems. They completely reconceptualized them in ways that made previous solutions obsolete. "Marcus, this facility you have created, it represents technological capabilities that exceed anything in current Council archives. When Admiral Kexton arrives and sees what you have accomplished, he'll understand that humans are not the primitive species he was told to expect," Marcus said firmly. "And hopefully he'll be curious enough about our actual capabilities to engage in meaningful dialogue rather than continued warfare." A warning chime from the communication system interrupted their conversation. Marcus checked the incoming signals, his expression growing serious as he reviewed the data. "We've got multiple fleet signatures approaching the system," he reported. "Looks like Admiral Kex, then, is bringing significant reinforcements. I'm reading at least 12 capital ships and maybe 50 escort vessels. A full battle fleet," Thexaler confirmed grimly. Admiral Kex then is clearly expecting significant resistance. "Well, he's going to get a surprise," Marcus said, activating the diplomatic facility's external communication arrays. "Let's see how he responds to a formal invitation to peace talks." The quantum transmitter powered up with a harmonic resonance that seemed to make the entire moon vibrate sympathetically. When Marcus spoke into the communication system, his voice was amplified and broadcast across all Council military frequencies with a clarity that suggested the diplomatic facility's technology was superior to anything currently deployed by either side. "Admiral Kex, then, this is Pilot Marcus Chun of the Human Defense Forces. I am currently providing medical assistance to Commander Thexaler, who was severely injured during our atmospheric engagement, but is now recovering successfully. I cordially invite you and your senior staff to attend formal diplomatic negotiations aimed at ending hostilities between our species. The response was immediate and predictably hostile. Human forces, you are holding a Zephyrian officer against his will in violation of galactic conventions regarding prisoners of war. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Thex Aller moved to the communication station, his newly healed wing folding gracefully against his massive frame. Admiral Kex, then, this is Commander Thex Aller. I'm not a prisoner. Pilot Chun has saved my life and provided me with medical treatment that exceeds our own capabilities. I strongly advise you to accept his invitation for diplomatic discussions. Another pause, longer this time. Commander, are you speaking under duress? I am speaking as a military officer providing an honest tactical assessment to my superior. Thex Aller replied firmly. Admiral, the humans are not our enemies. They're defending themselves against what they perceive as an unprovoked attack. If we approach them with diplomatic intentions rather than military ones, I believe peaceful coexistence is not only possible, but inevitable. Commander, maintain your position. We will extract you within the hour. The transmission ended, but Marcus was already tracking the approaching fleet on his enhanced sensor arrays. They're deploying in standard battle formation, he reported. Doesn't look like Admiral Kex then is interested in diplomacy. Then, we must provide him with a demonstration he cannot ignore, Thex Aller said grimly. Already working on it, Marcus replied, his fingers dancing across control interfaces that had been completely redesigned according to human ergonomic principles. Dr. Kim forwarded some interesting research about quantum resonance fields that should get their attention. As Marcus worked, the diplomatic facility began generating energy signatures unlike anything in Council technology databases. The quantum resonance field extended outward from the moon's surface, creating a zone of space where conventional weapons simply stopped functioning. Not disabled or destroyed, just rendered temporarily inert, as if the fundamental laws of physics had been gently adjusted to make violence impossible. What have you done? Thex Aller asked in wonder. Created a peace zone, Marcus explained. Any weapon that enters the field loses its destructive capability until it leaves the area. Ships can still maneuver normally, communications still work, life support systems are unaffected, but nothing designed to cause harm will function. That is impossible. You cannot selectively disable weapons without affecting other technology. You can if you understand the quantum signatures that differentiate destructive intent from constructive purpose, Marcus replied. Dr. Kim's research into consciousness and quantum coherence provided the theoretical framework. Professor Chen's work on selective field manipulation provided the practical application. On the sensor displays, Admiral Kexton's battle fleet was approaching the edge of the peace zone, their weapons charged and targeting systems locked onto the diplomatic facility. Thex Aller held his breath as the lead ships crossed the threshold of Marcus's impossible field. Instantly, every weapons array in the fleet powered down, their energy signatures shifting from destructive to inert. The ships themselves continued moving normally, but their capacity for violence had been temporarily suspended by technology that violated everything the Galactic Council understood about physics. The communication system crackled with confused and angry voices as Council fleet commanders tried to understand what had happened to their weapons. Admiral Kexthan's voice cut through the chaos, demanding explanations that no one could provide. Marcus activated the diplomatic facility's external speakers, his calm voice reaching every ship in the fleet simultaneously. Admiral Kex, then, welcome to the Kepler 442b diplomatic zone. Your weapons have been safely disabled, but your ships and crews are completely unharmed. We invite you to join us on the surface for peaceful discussions about ending this unnecessary conflict. What have you done to our ships? Admiral Kex then demanded. Nothing permanent, Marcus assured him. The moment you leave the peace zone, all your systems will return to normal function. But while you're here, we can talk without the threat of violence getting in the way of real communication. Thex Aller watched the sensor readings as Admiral Kexton's flagship slowly approached the diplomatic facility, its crew presumably wrestling with the implications of encountering technology that could disable their weapons while leaving everything else untouched. When a massive ship finally settled into a landing pattern near the converted dreadnought, he knew that the real test was about to begin. Either Admiral Kex then would prove capable of abandoning his preconceptions about human capabilities and engaging in meaningful dialogue, or the galaxy was about to witness the start of a war that would make the current conflict look like a minor disagreement. As the flagship's landing ramps extended and armed Zephyrian soldiers began emerging, Fexaler found himself hoping that his species was capable of the same kind of adaptive thinking that had allowed humans to survive and thrive in a hostile universe. Because if they weren't, he was beginning to suspect that the Galactic Council was about to learn why challenging humanity had been the worst mistake in their civilization's history.